Okay, good morning. I'm Jeff Doyle, and welcome to another session of Between Two Nerds with Jeff and Jeff. And with me is the first and foremost Jeff Tansura. How are you doing this morning, Jeff?
Hi, good morning, Jeff. Doing pretty well. Still on crutches, but doing better.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's sort of a mixed blessing, right? You've had some knee problems, but you incurred it while on vacation in Italy. So there's if you've got to have knee problems, I guess that's the place to have it, huh?
Yeah, one has to pay for pleasures.
For the rest of you, Jeff was on vacation in Italy, and on Facebook, all of a sudden there was a picture that popped up and with him in some beautiful spot on crutches, and I thought, oh no. But anyway, so we're going to finish up our discussion of multi-homing in the data center with ESI. We discussed last time why people are still using multi-chassis lag, and why that's a problem, why it's difficult, aside from the fact that it can be complex and varied. It restricts you because pretty much every vendor has their own solution. So you really can't do a multi-vendor solution. ESI has been around pretty much since the beginning, not pretty much, it has been around since the beginning of EVPN, even with EVPN in MPLS. And we discussed last time why vendors have been a little bit slow on rolling out ESI, why users have been a little bit slow in rolling out ESI in their data center. But we want to finish up that discussion today. And before we get there, a couple of things. Just as a reminder, these sessions, as we've said before, are published on YouTube. Please subscribe and like us there. That really helps with our viewership and status there. And one other thing that I really want to say that we've really neglected to say in earlier sessions is a big thank you to the two guys that are actually behind the scenes in these live streams and are really running everything, which is Josh Saul and Robert Lancaster. So thank you guys for making these things work as well as they do. And it's very nice for Jeff and I just to show up and jabber on about technical things and not have to actually worry about the minutiae of running the live stream itself, because you guys do such a great job. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You're my heroes.
Yeah. So Jeff, I actually had to. We've been away for a few weeks, and I had to actually look back. Speaking of YouTube, to our last session to remember where we left off. So if you want to just dive in and pick up at our last session or our last topic, that would be great.
Yeah, so during the last meeting, we focused on route types. So route type 1, route type 4 that are mandatory and necessary for ESI multi-homing to work. And we spent some time on theory. As well, we kind of covered aliasing in layer 2, but I would like to do some recaps today because it leads us into L3 aliasing. So let's start. We've repeatedly talking about the complexity of multi-chassis locks. There are more implementations than vendors. You cannot run it between two different vendors. It breaks the beauty of systematic design with leaf spine. It requires peer link, so you have a link between two leaves. Moreover, now with L3 on peer link, you need to run BGP session per VRF and whatnot, so really bad. So ESI is really there to normalize, to use BGP as control plane for synchronization of state between different members of the link aggregation groups, or member of an Ethernet segment. And
I love
when
I love the
working, really
I
beautiful.
love the multi-homing gives you superpowers.
Yeah, so I think it's Netherlands, back home. So as we covered, there is route type 1, and there are two subtypes. One is per EVI, that's used for aliasing, and this is the focus of today. Another one is per ES, that's used for fast withdrawal. Route type 4 is used for DF election, so who is going to send BAM traffic towards the server. And some changes to route type 2, when together with MAC address, you also get ESI. So let's go again through setup of ESI. So we've got a server that owns MAC address C connected to switches. After the configuration has been committed and the interface is up, so it's important if you configure aggregate Ethernet interface on Juniper or port channel on Cisco, unless this interface comes up, you won't see any BGP advertisement. And this is a good thing, right? You want everything to work, and there are some dependencies. So interface is up, we advertise route type 4, and two switches decide who is going to be the designated forwarder. Then route type 1 pairs advertised, going to be used for mass withdrawal. So as we said, ES is a physical link. There could be many VLANs on it if it's trunk. There could be many thousands or even millions MAC addresses behind it. What we want when this link goes down, we want to withdraw all of them simultaneously. So route type 1 per ES is exactly for that. Route type 1 per EVI is used for aliasing. And again, this is the focus of today. So what's happening when we start sending traffic, usually it's hashed on one of the links, because we want to hash per flow to avoid packets coming out of order. And we will see what it does to forwarding and how other switches treat this kind of traffic. So very importantly, after all the infrastructure routes have been advertised, we are going to re-advertise route type 2 with ESI set now, because if you remember, normally without multi-homing, ESI is set to 0. So this is the end result. We are going to advertise MAC C to switch 7, because this is the one that's been chosen by hashing. So route type 4 is going to be imported only by switches that participate in this particular ES. How it's done? We are going to extract 6 high order from the ESI and automatically create import statement for this extended community, as well to create a new route target that is going to be used specifically for route type 4. So when switch 4, let us draw. When switch 4 receives MAC address C, it will have ESI set to that of configured on switches 6 and 7. So switch 4, or actually every switch on the network, will know that if it needs to send traffic towards MAC C, it can use either switch 6 or 7. So the data structure, imagine there is no multi-homing. The data structure is going to be MAC address C, send it to VTAP address of one of the switches, right? The switch it's connected to. So the switch that's sending traffic is going to encapsulate it into VXLAN, set destination outer header to VTAP's IP address, send it. The receiving switch will receive it, decapsulate, and switch it. In case of ESI, data structure is getting an indirection. So rather than pointing directly to the VTAP IP address, there's intermediate data structure that is ESI. And then ESI is going to point to switch 6 and 7. So you see there's a degree of indirection. MAC address itself is pointing to ESI, and then ESI is pointing to VTAP IP addresses of 6 and 7. On merchant silicon, this kind of stuff is usually done in software, so we call it kind of RIP optimization, and in forwarding plane, you're going to see only the most right part. So we squeeze out this information, and FIP doesn't need to know. But this is what we do for layer 2. So what about layer 3?
Just to chime in there for a moment, you said you saw a banner a moment ago, but if any of you have questions at any point, please do submit your questions, and we're monitoring those, and hopefully we'll be able to address your questions as they come in. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Absolutely. So we actually received great question on YouTube, I believe. So please do send questions. And the question was, so if 7 is the only switch that is seeing traffic and 6 need to send traffic to this MAC address, it doesn't know that it's directly connected, right? Because it didn't see any traffic coming from there. What's happening? And it's a great question. So theoretically, you might say, hey, since I know that it's on 7, I can just encapsulate it into VXLAN send to 7. Obviously, it's going to be very, very unoptimized, right? Because 6 is directly connected. So what's happening here? 6 is going to receive route type 2 advertisements, this MAC address, and ESI set. Since 6 knows that it has this ESI configured locally, what it's going to do is going to treat this advertisement as locally generated and create pointer towards this layer 2 adjacency, right? So it's not going to send traffic to 7, so 7 sends it to the server. Rather, it's going to send it directly to the server because it received BGP advertisement of the MAC address. So this is for layer 2. So what about layer 3? We still have all the routes. So as you remember, route type 2 has MAC address part that is mandatory, but IP address that is optional, right? So what we just described is when you receive MAC address only. So how do we know MAC addresses? When servers start sending traffic, we see it in data plane, we advertise it in BGP. IP address usually known through ARP. So when you start ARPing, a switch will snoop ARP packets and figure out that MAC address is associated with particular IP address. So in this case, route type 2 is going to have 2 entries. One is for MAC address, one is for IP address. And these 2 routes could be sent independently. In most cases, both will exist. So you'll see one route type 2 with MAC address only, and another route type 2 with MAC address and IP address. We are going to go through the same use case, but now with both MAC and IP advertised by the switches connected to the server. So theoretically, you might say, hey, why is it important and different? I still have all my information. So I've run DF election. I've advertised RT1 per ES. I've advertised RT1 per EVI. So now I can use ESI in route type 2 for aliasing, but not so fast. So now we are advertising route type 2 with not only MAC-C, but also IPX with ESI set. However, what's important now is that MAC address is very simple structure, right? The only way you are going to use this MAC address is to send traffic, to switch traffic to this MAC address. IP address is used for many more things. It's used for proxy ARP. It's used for routing when local endpoint is not there. So if you look at implementations, the data structure is much more complex. And actually, for people who work for vendors, IRB implementation, even before VPN, were extremely, extremely complex. So numerous bugs, whatnot. So what we ended up with is that while theoretically it's very easy to remember that since I already have my EVI and ESI, I can load share based on that. However, different vendors based on silicon, they do based on software, decided or maybe were pushed to implement it differently. So some vendors, and since we are not judging here, we are not naming names, probably we can discuss another time, some vendors have implemented it in exactly the way as we described. There's no difference between layer 2 and layer 3 aliasing. So in this case, 7 is the switch that's receiving the traffic hashed. It will advertise route type 2 with MAC address C and IP of X. Switch 4 will have MAC address. It will have ESI set. It will also know IP address. So it will use exactly the same set of information to load share across 6 and 7. So some other vendors had some different opinion and maybe just difficulties implementing their silicon. So how it works on these platforms. They used EVPN, RPD extended community, to advertise the same information from switches that don't own it. And we are going to go through details now. So as you see, extended community has this format and has flag P that stands for proxy. There are two drafts that describe usage. So the first draft is mostly about IPv6, because in IPv6, you need more information than just IP address to properly do network discovery. This draft is not necessarily meant for load sharing. It's more meant for failure scenario. Again, I'll explain them, but it's used for load sharing. So what's happening here? Exactly the same scenario. Switch 7 is going to send route type 2 with MAC and IP address. So every switch is going to receive it. So switch 6 that participates in the same ES will see common ESI and will re-advertise exactly the same route, but now with proxy flag set. So when switch 4 receives all the advertisement, it will have one advertisement without P flag set, so from switch 7, and all other members of ES, in this case switch 6, will also advertise route type 2, but now with proxy flag set. So switch 4 is going to use this advertisement to build an layer 3 CMP structure and start sending traffic to all the members, in this case to switch 6 and 7. So you see the difference in implementations is really significant, because one is just using ESI to do load sharing same way for type 2s and layer 2 and layer 3, while another using additional advertisement or in other lingo, re-origination of route to load share across. So the end result is going to be exactly the same. I've got some example for you here. It's from Arista. So as you could see, this is BGP route advertisement. So I tried to make it as large as I could because people complained they couldn't read it. So what's important here, we've got two switches connected to a server, and we are looking at route type 2. So it has IP address and MAC address, which is a regular route. So the first route you see is the original one. It's coming from switch 7. What's important in second advertisement, it's coming from secondary one. And this is exactly what we are talking about. You see proxy flag set, which tells all other switches it's re-originated by a switch that doesn't own this route type 2. It's just re-advertising it. So this structure allows all other switches to create a CMP bundle and start CMPing towards this IP address. Looking at routing table, so now I'm using VRF, and I'm looking for the IP address associated with this route type 2. You could see that this IP address could be reached through VTAPs on switch 6 and 7. They're in the same VNI, obviously. It has to be. And use different router MACs that we have learned from the route type 2 advertisement. There's an extended community that allows us to learn router MAC address. So all of this is very specific to synchronous IRB. Because remember, in synchronous, we use double label or double VNIs in route type 2. We advertise one for layer 2 only and another one for layer 3 only. So this is how layer 3 aliasing works on different vendors. So again, from kind of control plane perspective, from the end result, they look exactly the same. Your route to the destination is going to have 2 next hops, and we will be able to load share across them per flow. So this is the focus.
And we did get a question.
Yeah.
We did get a question from Brian. Really good question here, with asking with different vendor implementations, can I mix multiple vendor ESIs in the same network and fabric, or does ESI force me to use a single vendor implementation?
So it's a great question, and if you rewatch our last ESI podcast, you will see that there are also different ESI types. Now the beauty of implementations. So ESIs look very different depending on route type. So here we are, actually last time we talked about ESI type 0, which is completely manual. So you put whatever you like in it. There are other types that use some other information, for example, system MAC address or derived through LACP. So what's important is that when you configure 2 switches that participate in the same ES, you use same ESI type. Could be a problem. If we look at the vendors, NXIS does type 3. Cumulus in first implementation, it's Cumulus 4.2, does type 3 only. They personally promised me to do type 0 in next release. Juniper and Arista both do type 0, type 1, some type 2. So make sure both leaves that are connected through ES have same ES type supported. With regards to treatment of this information from sending switches, you really need to test. So if you only support type 0 and you receive type 3, you might not know what to do with it, because now your first nibble is set to 0.3 versus 0.0. So some vendors in some releases treat it properly, some other discard. I don't think it's goal here to build kind of extensive table of which vendor does what with who, but if you are in multi-vendor scenario, you definitely need to test ESIs. Practically, ESI really meant to work across vendors. We are slowly getting there, but implementations are early, at least on the switches that are directly connected to the ES. At this point in time, it's probably safer to use same vendor. I mean, we are kind of going back to MLOC. In MLOC case, it's mandatory because control plane is proprietary. There's no way other vendor can understand it. Here, there's a chance that it's not going to work. However, if ESI type supported is the same, so for this case, let's imagine it's Arista and Juniper, there's very good chance that things are going to work well and interop.
Kind of a related question to that is, assuming that you've verified everything in the lab and you've got 2 vendors whose ESI implementations work well together, how difficult is it to migrate from an MLAG implementation to an ESI implementation?
It's a good question. It's kind of different configuration. So you'll need to deconfigure the synchronization part and configure ESI part. So configuration is not complex. It's usually 3-4 lines. I mean, we are still thinking in terms of CLI. If you are using some kind of orchestration system, for example, our on AOS, it will completely take care of transformation. So if you change the connectivity type from MLOC to ESI, under the hood, it will do all the changes. Practically, the changes are on the leaves that are connected to ES. The rest of the network, given they support load sharing and understand ESI, is transparent. So again, you are only going to change configuration on the switches that are directly connected to ES. And you could start one by one. And on most vendors, the transition is very straightforward. It's good to know, for example, that Juniper doesn't do EVPN with mlock on QFX and AX switches. On NXS, where they use their own version of mlock called VPC, the migration is reasonably complex because VPC is really comprehensive. So you would need to prepare in advance and understand. You'll see different routes. You will see even your original routes crafted differently because now you're going to set ESI. You're going to advertise type 1 and 4. So there are a lot of changes to the control plane that's not necessarily generated by user traffic, so type 2s, type 5s, but really infrastructural part. So before you go into production, definitely you need to test it. You need to make sure you understand how things work, implications when something isn't working, and test, test, test.
Okay, and there was another question that popped up a moment ago from Chinar, and I'm just reading. Oh, there it is. What if there's a downstream L2 switch connected via LACP Ether channel to the two EVPN multi-homed active switches? How does STP work? Does the downstream L2 switch see only one bridge ID in the received BPDUs?
So this is why we use aggregated Ethernet or port channels or LUCs. There's no STP because there is no loop. So there is no this link here that creates the loop. So that's why we run STP, right? Imagine there's a link here, and obviously packet you start sending to 6 will go to 7 and back here. So it's classical layer 2 loop. In case of link aggregation group, there is no loop, and the formation of Ethernet channel represents itself to 6 and 7 as the same interface. Right? So 6 is not going to send traffic to 7, in other words. So there's no need for STP in any form. But to answer your question, if this is a switch, it will have exactly similar configuration to 6 and 7. It's mandatory for LUC or multi-chassis LUC to work because from its perspective, it's connected to a single switch. 6 and 7 do know, obviously, because 7 is not 6 and the other way around, that they're different, but from client perspective, it's connected to the same device. And this is how we completely eliminate any need for control plane such as STP to run and the loop prevention, all nasty stuff that you get with layer 2.
Yeah, and it's important to, from the larger perspective, to remember that if we're talking about just BGP EVPN in general, the whole point is to be able to run our layer 2 topology on top of a layer 3 loop-free topology using both the physical infrastructure of a CLO topology and the logical infrastructure of BGP on top of that, where we can prevent loops. And really this whole topic here of MC lag and ESI is, but what happens when you're connecting down at layer 2? And now we're again dealing with the potential loop, as Jeff said, and so that's the whole point of MLAG is from the perspective of the server. It just sees that it has a single link into the topology rather than something that's going to need spanning tree to prevent loops.
And significant difference with ESI. So imagine if you do MLOC and you want to connect more switches. So you go into this kind of situation.
Right. And let's see. Oh, one more question here. How does bum traffic or how bum traffic is forwarded, which is coming from the downstream server with ESI configuration, or how is bum traffic forwarded?
So bum traffic is going in two directions, right? It could be sent by server here or server here. So let's take number first. Actually, we had pretty good discussion on LinkedIn a few days ago. How do we make sure, or how do we tell switch 4 not to send bump traffic to switch that is not DF election. It's not possible, and DF election is not meant to be an optimization technique. It's local to the switch only. Even so, route type 4s are sent to everybody. So theoretically, what you could do is to run DF election on behalf of every other switch and figure out who is the DF, who is the designated forwarder. It's not meant for that. So 4 is always going to send bump traffic to everyone who participates in this particular EVI. And then every switch here, based on its DF status, will decide what to do with it. So in this case, let's say 7 wants the DF election. So 6 is going to drop bump traffic on receival, while 7 is going to send it down to the MAC-C. In another direction, there's no difference. So from perspective of the server, bump traffic is a flow, right? It has particular characteristics. So it's going to hash it to particular link, and switch 7 is going to replicate it to every other switch that participates in CVN. If you remember, we described it a few lessons ago. Every switch that participates in the same EVI is going to advertise route type 3. So let's say it's switch 4, 6, and 7. So when 7 sends the traffic to all other switches, it would have received type 3 from 6 and from 4. So its flooding group is going to consist out of these two switches. So switch 6 and 4. So it's going to flood traffic in case of ingress replication. So it's going to replicate it to 6 and 4. In case of multicast or network replication, it will send bump traffic encapsulated in multicast with destination multicast groups that switch 6 and 4 have subscribed to. In other words, there's no real difference between multi-homed and single-homed servers.
Great answer. Looks like we're about. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, if you feel I didn't answer your question, something's unclear, please use, I don't know, LinkedIn, YouTube, any of the channels available. I'll be more than happy to, or we, Jeff, will be more than happy to elaborate on any of your questions.
All right, and it looks like we're a little bit over on time, so we probably need to wrap things up here. And as Jeff just mentioned about YouTube, please, if you are looking at our live stream on YouTube, and I'm told that we get a lot more of an audience there than we actually do on the live sessions, please do like us there, subscribe to our channel, and we will continue delivering some really interesting topics. So Jeff, thank you for this week, and look forward to being back here again in 2 weeks.
Jeff, thank you. Thanks everyone for your time and attention, and we are looking forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day.